In the shadowed mists of history, long before the fountains of the great deep were broken open to drown the world in water, the earth stood in a precarious balance. This was the antediluvian age, a time when the veil between the physical and the spiritual was incredibly thin, and the lifespan of men stretched for centuries. In these ancient days lived Enoch, the son of Jared, the seventh patriarch in the lineage of Adam. He was a man unlike any other of his generation. While the hearts of men began to drift into shadows, chasing the fleeting desires of the flesh, Enoch walked a solitary path. He was a scribe of righteousness, a man whose eyes had been opened by the Holy One to see the visions of the heavens. He did not merely live upon the earth, he communicated with the unseen realm, acting as a bridge between the dust of the ground and the glory of the skies. Enoch spent his days in deep contemplation, observing the intricate machinery of creation. He looked to the heavens and studied the works of the sky. He observed how the luminaries of heaven do not change their paths, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, and transgress not against their appointed command. He watched the summer and the winter, how the whole earth is filled with water, and clouds and dew and rain lie upon it. He observed the trees, how in winter they seem withered and dead, yet they hold the promise of life, waiting for the command to bloom. He saw that every leaf, every star, and every river obeyed the will of the Creator without question. The sea did not cross its boundaries. The moon did not fail its phases. All of nature existed in a perfect, harmonious symphony of obedience. But humanity was the sour note in this song. Enoch saw that the children of men had begun to corrupt their ways. Unlike the steadfast stars or the obedient tides, men had turned their backs on the cosmic order. They chose chaos over law and darkness over light. But the true danger was not springing from the earth alone. As Enoch looked toward the northern peaks, toward the snow-capped summit of Mount Hermon, he felt a shifting in the spiritual atmosphere. The heavens were watching, but they were no longer watching with benevolence. A shadow was lengthening across the world, descending from the stars above. The watchers were coming, and the ancient order was about to be shattered forever. As the generations of men multiplied upon the face of the earth, a new beauty began to bloom among them. In those days, daughters were born unto men, women of such grace and comeliness that their radiance reached even the highest firmaments. They were innocent, unaware that their beauty would become the catalyst for a cosmic tragedy. High above the clouds, in the station of the watchers, the sons of heaven looked down. These were beings of pure spirit, tasked with guiding and observing humanity. But as they gazed upon the daughters of men, their holy detachment shattered. A fire, not of divine love, but of forbidden lust, ignited within them. They whispered among themselves, a conspiracy of desire that would shake the foundations of the universe. Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men and beget us children. But this was no simple transgression. It was treason against the Most High. Semyaza, the leader of these 200 angels, stood apart. He was a being of immense power and wisdom, and he understood the terrifying weight of what they proposed. He knew that to mix spirit with flesh was to violate the primeval laws of creation. With a voice trembling with both anticipation and dread, he spoke to his brethren. I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. Semyaza feared that at the last moment the others would retreat in fear of God, leaving him to bear the punishment of the fall alone. But the desire of the watchers was stronger than their fear of judgment. They gathered together on the windswept summit of Mount Hermon, a place whose very name would come to mean oath and curse. Under the cover of darkness, with the stars they were abandoning watching from above, they answered Semyaza as one voice, "Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing." It was a solemn and terrifying moment. One by one, the angels swore the anathema. They bound themselves with a curse, agreeing that if they went down, they would go down together, and if they fell, they would fall as one brotherhood of rebellion. 200 celestial princes, chiefs of tens, descended upon the peak of Hermon. They shed their glory, cloaking their blinding light in dense material forms, stepping onto the soil of the earth not as guardians, but as predators. The barrier between heaven and earth was breached, and the dark age of the watchers had begun. The descent of the 200 was not a quiet invasion. It was a seduction that mesmerized the world. The Watchers did not appear as monsters, but as radiant beings, cloaked in the stolen glory of the upper heavens. They walked into the villages of men like gods made flesh, and the daughters of men were powerless against their celestial charm. The laws of nature, written by the Creator to keep the species separate, were violently torn apart. Each angel chose for himself a wife, and they began to go in unto them, commingling the eternal fire of spirits with the mortal clay of humanity. It was a defilement of the bloodline, a corruption of the very essence of what it meant to be human. The earth trembled at the fruit of this conception. The women who bore the seed of the Watchers suffered greatly, for they did not carry human children. Their wombs swelled with an unnatural swiftness, birthing creatures that defied all reason. These were the Nephilim, the fallen ones. They were not men, but giants of terrifying stature, whose height reached 3,000 ells. As infants, they cast shadows over their mothers. As adolescents, they towered over the tallest cedars of Lebanon. They were beings of immense power, but they lacked the spirit of grace. They were vessels of raw, unbridled appetite. At first, humanity tried to appease these new demigods. The fathers and brothers of the women toiled in the fields, harvesting grain, slaughtering cattle, and pouring out wine to feed the insatiable hunger of the giants. But the appetite of a Nephilim knows no bounds. They consumed all the acquisitions of men. The granaries were emptied, the flocks were depleted, and the land was stripped bare. When there was nothing left to give, the giants turned their gaze upon their providers. The gods became monsters. They began to devour mankind. Panic swept across the earth as the Nephilim began to snatch up men like insects, tearing limbs from bodies and drinking the blood, an act strictly forbidden by the laws of creation. The land became a hunting ground, but their hunger was not satisfied with human flesh alone. They sinned against the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, the reptiles that crawl, and the fish of the sea. They twisted nature itself, creating hybrids and chimeras in their madness. Finally, in a frenzy of gluttony and rage, they turned on one another, cannibalizing their own kind, devouring flesh and drinking blood in a chaotic orgy of violence. The earth was no longer a garden. It was a graveyard. The physical devastation wrought by the giants was matched only by the spiritual poison injected into the minds of men. While the Nephilim crushed the bodies of humanity, the Watchers enslaved their souls with forbidden knowledge. Chief among these corruptors was Azazel, a fallen prince who sought to arm humanity with the instruments of their own destruction. Before his descent, men fought with sticks and stones, driven by survival. Azazel changed the face of conflict forever. He revealed the secrets of the metals hidden deep within the earth's crust. He taught men how to mine the gold, the silver, and the iron, and how to smelt them in the fires of industry. Under his tutelage, the smoke of forges blackened the sky, and from the anvils rang the sound of a new age. He taught them to make swords that could sever bone, knives for the assassin's hand, shields to deflect justice, and breastplates to harden the heart against mercy. War was no longer a desperate struggle. It became an art form, a calculated science of slaughter. But Azazel's teachings were not limited to the battlefield. To the women, he revealed the secrets of vanity and seduction, turning beauty into a weapon. He showed them the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids, teaching them to paint their faces with coloring tinctures and to adorn themselves with bracelets and precious stones. Mirrors reflected faces that were no longer content with their natural form. The innocence of the countenance was lost, replaced by a fabricated allure designed to ensnare the senses and incite lust. The world was plunged into a fever of desire and violence, where appearance was idolized and power was worshipped. The corruption spread like a plague as the other chiefs of the Watchers unlocked the darker mysteries of the cosmos. Semyaza, the leader of the rebellion, taught enchantments and the cutting of roots, the ancient arts of sorcery and poison. He showed them how to bend nature to their will through spells. Armaros taught the resolving of enchantments, creating a cycle of curses and counter-curses. Barakijal instructed men in astrology, while Kokobel taught the constellations. Ezekiel revealed the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. Humanity stopped looking to the heavens to worship the Creator. Instead, they looked up to divine their own fortunes, seeking to control fate through the stars. Wisdom was replaced by occultism. The world had become a vast, open grave. There was no corner of the earth free from the stain of violence. As men perished by the thousands under the crushing feet of the giants and the sharp blades of their brothers, their souls did not simply vanish into the void. They gathered at the gates of the underworld, a chorus of agony that transcended the physical realm. The earth itself, personified as a grieving mother, began to accuse the lawless ones. It cried out against the weight of the blood that soaked its soil, demanding justice for the innocent. The voice of their crying went up, piercing the clouds, rising past the sphere of the moon, and reaching the very gates of the holy sanctuary. High above the chaos, where the silence of eternity reigns, the four great presences of the divine court looked down. Michael, the prince of the heavenly host; Uriel, the light of God; Raphael, the healer of nations; and Gabriel, the strength of the Almighty. They gazed through the windows of heaven and saw the devastation below. They saw the rivers choked with corpses and the cities burning with the fires of Azazel. They heard the suit of the human soul saying, "Bring our cause before the Most High." The horror of the situation moved the unmovable. These beings who dwell in the presence of absolute holiness could no longer remain silent witnesses to the corruption of the Creator's masterpiece. They turned to one another, their voices resonating like thunder and harps, and approached the throne of glory. They laid their petition before the Lord of the ages, speaking with the authority of those who stand in the fire. "Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings," they declared, "the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou, and all things are naked and open in thy sight. And thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee." They continued, laying out the specific indictment against the rebel watchers. "Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And thou seest Semyaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. They have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness." The archangels presented the despair of humanity as their final argument. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended, and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. Thou knowest all things before they come to pass, and thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them, and thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. It was a plea for intervention. A call for the Omnipotent to step in before the flame of life was extinguished completely from the face of the earth. The silence of the heavens was broken not by a whisper, but by a decree that shook the foundations of the firmament. The plea of the archangels had reached the ears of the Most High, and the time for patience had passed. The Great Holy One, the Lord of Spirits, rose from his throne to issue the first sentence of the apocalypse. He did not address the armies of men or the giants first. He aimed his judgment at the root of the technological and spiritual infection. He summoned Raphael, the archangel whose name signifies the healing of God, for before the earth could be healed, the cancer had to be cut out. The command was absolute and terrifying in its specificity. "Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness." Raphael descended with the speed of a falling star, a streak of emerald light cutting through the gloom of the corrupted world. He sought out Azazel, the fallen star who had taught men to forge the blades of their own destruction. Azazel, who had once stood in the radiant presence of God, now stood amidst the smoke and blood of his own making. But against the authority of the Most High, the teacher of war had no defense. Raphael overpowered the rebel, stripping him of his armor and binding his limbs with chains that no smith on earth, not even those trained by Azazel himself, could forge. The fallen angel was dragged away from the civilizations he had corrupted, away from the worship of men, into the desolate, howling wastelands. The destination was Dudale, a place of jagged rocks and unforgiving silence in the heart of the desert. There, at the command of the Lord, Raphael made an opening in the earth, a deep, jagged fissure that led into the bowels of the wilderness. He cast Azazel therein, throwing him into the abyss. But the judgment did not end with imprisonment. The Lord had commanded, "Place upon him rough and jagged rocks." The earth was piled upon the fallen angel, burying him beneath the weight of the very world he sought to rule. To ensure his complete isolation, Raphael covered Azazel's face with darkness, proclaiming, "Let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light." The being who had brought the false light of forbidden knowledge to humanity was sentenced to absolute crushing darkness until the end of time. This punishment was unique. While other watchers would share a collective fate, Azazel was singled out for a specific burden. The Lord declared, "And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire." But until that day, he would serve as the scapegoat for the sins of the world. The divine decree echoed across the cosmos, "For the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin." He was made to bear the guilt of every sword forged, every drop of blood spilled in war, and every soul lost to vanity. He was buried alive, a prisoner of the rock, waiting for the final fire, while the earth began to breathe again, freed from its primary corrupter. The judgment of the heavens was twofold. While Azazel was bound in the silence of the desert, a louder, more chaotic sentence was passed against the living abominations that roamed the earth. The Lord of Spirits summoned Gabriel, the Mighty One, the messenger of divine strength. His mission was not one of imprisonment, but of extermination. The command echoed with terrifying finality: "Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of the watchers from amongst men." The Nephilim, those titans who believed themselves to be the new gods of the earth, had no future. The decree continued, "Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For a length of days shall they not have." The Watchers had hoped their sons would live forever, establishing an eternal dynasty, but the Almighty cut their hope short. Gabriel descended upon the world, but he did not unsheath a sword of steel. Instead, he wielded a weapon far more potent, the spirit of madness and discord. He moved invisibly among the camps of the giants, whispering paranoia and rage into their minds. The unnatural brotherhood that held the monsters together began to fracture. A glance became an insult. A gesture became a threat. The lust for blood, which they had satisfied by devouring mankind, was suddenly turned inward. The civil war of the giants began not with a declaration, but with a sudden eruptive violence that shook the continents. It was a spectacle of horror that the earth had never seen. Brothers, born of the same angelic fathers, lunged at each other with the ferocity of wild beasts. Because they possessed the strength of angels but the mortality of flesh, their battle was cataclysmic. They uprooted ancient cedars to use as clubs. They hurled massive boulders that crushed entire hillsides. The ground cracked under the weight of their wrestling, and the skies roared with their screams of pain and fury. It was a fratricidal slaughter of biblical proportions. The blood of the giants, thick and dark, flowed like rivers into the valleys, poisoning the soil they fell upon. But the true punishment was not just for the giants, it was for their fathers. Semyaza and the other watchers, who had yet to be bound, were forced to witness this carnage. They stood on the periphery, paralyzed by the divine will, unable to lift a hand to save their beloved offspring. They watched as the sons they adored, the men of renown they had bred to rule the world, tore each other apart limb by limb. The grief of the fallen angels was absolute. They saw their legacy turned into meat and dust. The battle raged until not a single giant remained standing. The earth was littered with the colossal corpses of the Nephilim, a graveyard of failed gods. The noise of the war faded, leaving only the silence of extinction and the heavy copper scent of blood hanging in the air. Gabriel's mission was complete. The seed of corruption had been purged by its own violence. The earth was now silent, save for the wind howling over the graves of the giants. The Watchers, the 200 princes of heaven who had abandoned their stations, stood amidst the ruin of their own making. They were broken not by weapons but by grief. They had sacrificed their celestial inheritance for the love of their sons, and now those sons were dust. It was in this moment of absolute vulnerability that the final stroke of justice fell. The Lord of Spirits commanded Michael, the archangel of war and the protector of the divine order, to descend. His mission was not to bring death, for angels cannot die like men, but to bring something arguably worse: eternal containment. The command was thunderous: "Go, bind Semyaza and his associates who have united themselves with women so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness." Michael descended like a pillar of blinding white fire, his presence stripping away any remaining pride the fallen angels possessed. Semyaza, the leader who had once feared he would pay the penalty alone, now found that his entire brotherhood shared his doom. There was no resistance. The rebellion was over. The corruption of the bloodlines had been halted, and now the corruptors themselves had to be removed from the face of creation. Michael bound them fast, not with ropes, but with chains of spiritual fire that seared their essence. The sentence was pronounced with terrifying precision: "Bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth." They were to be buried alive, cast into the deep, rocky crevices of the world, far from the light of the sun and the stars they once called home. They were sentenced to wait in darkness till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. The earth, which they had polluted with sorcery and blood, became their jail cell. But before they were cast down, a final crushing message was delivered. Enoch, the scribe of righteousness, was sent by the Lord to testify against them. He stood before the trembling watchers, a mere mortal man judging angels, and delivered the verdict: "You have no peace." They begged Enoch to write a petition for them, to ask God for forgiveness. Enoch, moved by pity, wrote their prayers and ascended to read them before the Lord. But the answer came back cold and final: "Judgment is passed upon you. Your petition will not be granted. And from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity. And in bonds of the earth the decree has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world." With hope extinguished, Semyaza and his 200 were dragged into the abyss. The ground opened up and swallowed them whole, plunging them into a chaotic realm of fire and darkness, a prison specifically prepared for immortal beings who transgress the laws of nature. The physical reign of the Watchers was over, ending not with a bang, but with the heavy sound of the earth sealing shut above their heads. They were gone, leaving behind only the scars on the land and the memory of a time when angels walked as men. With the Watchers bound in the darkness of the earth, the immediate threat to humanity was paused, but the education of the scribe Enoch was only just beginning. He was no longer bound by the laws of gravity or time. The holy angels, Uriel and Raphael, descended to claim him not for death but for revelation. They lifted Enoch from the solid ground, carrying him into the mists where the material world dissolves into the spiritual. It was a journey into the terrifying unknown, a pilgrimage to the very edges of existence where reality begins to fray. They brought him first to a place of darkness and wind, a region where no human foot had ever trod. Here, Enoch saw the mouth of the great abyss and rivers that flowed not with water but with fire. He saw a river of gray fire and a river of red fire, churning and roaring like living beasts, flowing toward the extremities of the earth. These were the boundaries of the mortal realm, the rivers of the deep that separate the living from the profound mysteries of the cosmos. Enoch watched in awe as massive mountains of darkness loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in eternal winter, yet glowing with an eerie internal heat. But the journey led him further, beyond the mountains, to a place that defied all description. It was the place of nothingness. Enoch looked around in terror, for he saw a chaotic and terrible thing. He recorded, "I saw there no things of heaven above, and no earth beneath, but a chaotic and terrible place." It was a void in the fabric of creation, a tear in the universe where neither the firmament of the sky nor the foundation of the ground existed. It was the absolute absence of order, a prepared desolation. In this horrifying void suspended in the emptiness, Enoch saw 7 stars of the heaven bound together. They did not twinkle like the gentle lights of the night sky. They were massive, colossal entities, like great mountains burning with fire. They writhed in the vacuum, consumed by flames yet never turning to ash. The sight was overwhelming, a visual representation of divine wrath on a galactic scale. Enoch, trembling, turned to his guide and asked, "For what sin are they bound, and on what account have they been cast in thither?" Then Uriel, the holy angel who was with him and was chief over them, answered, "Enoch, why dost thou ask, and why art thou eager for the truth? These are of the number of the stars of heaven which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord." Uriel explained that these were not the watchers who corrupted mankind with lust, but celestial powers who had disobeyed the laws of time. "They did not come forth at their appointed times," Uriel declared. "They had chosen their own path, defying the cosmic clockwork of the Creator. Therefore he was wroth with them and bound them till the time when their guilt should be consummated, even for 10,000 years. It was a sobering lesson for Enoch. Even the stars, creatures of immense power and light, were not above the law. From there, Enoch was taken to an even more terrifying place, the prison of the fallen watchers themselves. He saw a deep abyss with columns of heavenly fire falling into it. The fire did not have a bottom or a top. It was an infinite pillar of judgment. Uriel said, "This is the prison of the angels, and here they will be kept forever." Enoch looked into the chasm and felt the heat of the indignation of God. He saw that the place was a wasteland, terrifying to behold. It was here that he truly understood the gravity of sin. The universe was not just a machine of beauty, it was a kingdom of strict justice. As he stood on the precipice of hell, looking at the prisons of fire, Enoch realized that he was the only mortal witness to the machinery of eternity, a burden that weighed heavier on his soul than the vision of the giants.